Hello everybody. So I just released my first ever asset pack into the Unreal Marketplace on itch.io, on ArtStation, and soon it'll hopefully get through the vetting process on the Unity Asset Store. And I thought, hey, let's go through this asset pack and show you how to implement it in your Unreal Engine project. So a little bit about this pack. It's called Adaptive SciFi Music, Retrofuturistic Dystopia. As you can guess, there's a big focus on adaptive music, but I also intended for this pack to be a little bit more of a broader toolkit. So not only do you get some adaptive music to use in-game, but you get a little bit of music that is consistent with the in-game music that you can use for menu music or trailer music. There's 3 sets of dystopian cyberpunkish tracks. I've included a bonus orchestral only set, which has some of the adaptive in-game and menu music, but not a trailer track associated with that one. Just for those of you that like to do your cyberpunk with an orchestra rather than with synthesized instruments. So in here we have some kind of general loops that I've curated, but the core of it are these adaptive loops. So they're different, essentially, layers that you can build up and down depending on the intensity of the game and what sort of events are happening. So today I'm just gonna take you through the addition of this pack to a project and how it could be easily implemented using some of the included blueprints I have in there. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add this thing to a project. So I've already downloaded this for some of my own testing. I'm going to add it to this project, which is based off the Big Star Station Lumen asset that was free in the marketplace earlier in 2023. It's a pretty cool asset that has like a full sci-fi hangar / base / star station. So definitely right up my alley, and seems like a reasonably good fit for this asset pack. So I'll just add it to that project. We'll wait for it to go through. Next, I will go and open up the project itself. Once the project is up, you'll see that the music pack shows up in your content browser. Underneath, there are a few different sections. So we have adaptive loops, adaptive stems, blueprints, compiled loops, maps, and trailer tracks. So starting from the top, your adaptive loops, which are essentially the tracks you will use directly in Unreal Engine that maintain that adaptive consistency. So if I expose what's in here, you'll see of the 4 different tracks, the 4 different adaptive tracks that are in there, they'll be split into a low threat, high threat, battle overlay, melody 1, melody 2, and a short menu. So these are intended to be used as adaptive tracks with the included blueprint, and they loop. There's also this folder called Adaptive Stems, which is very similar, except that these things do not loop. They're intended to be used with middleware, where the middleware will take care of the looping, and it's just so that on the first pass, you don't get that little tail end of the loop. It actually starts fresh, and that is particularly important when you have the menu. So the menu tracks in here have a little lead in when they are in the adaptive stems, but when they are in the adaptive loops, they skip the lead in and just have a looping bit. So as an example, let's go to this critical malfunction, which is track number 3, and let's listen to the stem. So that first bit you heard until the drums came in was the lead in for that menu. If I go to the same thing in the adaptive loops under critical malfunction, the short version, you'll hear it'll start right at that kind of upbeat portion. So if you are using middleware like Fmod or WWise, or if you're adding some more complex blueprints of your own, you'd be able to basically retain that lead in and then loop at the appropriate loop point for subsequent passes of the song. So next, going into blueprints, we have this adaptive action music class and this adaptive action track class. So basically the adaptive action track is a simple class that just defines the structure of a track. So again, that low threat, high threat, battle overlay, melody 1, melody 2, just defines those 5 components for a particular track. And then adaptive action music is going to be the blueprint class that contains the functionality of that adaptive music. So I will show you how that gets implemented through this tutorial. Then under compiled loops, for those of you that don't really want to deal with the adaptive nature and you want to just jump right into kind of simple loops that switch back and forth, I've curated a few different options that combine some of the different layers. So for example, low threat with a melody, a low threat with melody and battle, high threat with melody, and high threat with melody and battle. So if you prefer to just kind of have a simple loop and then switch back and forth rather than fading the different layers in and out, this is an option you can take. The project includes an example map, which is super basic, that just has all of these tracks implemented with some keyboard shortcuts, so you can kind of play through the level, turn different layers on and off, switch through the tracks. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to get into that. Rather, what I'm going to show you is how to add a fresh set of blueprints into an existing level. And then the last set is the trailer tracks. So these are for the 3 non-orchestral sets. They're based on the menu music, more or less, but with a little bit of a build-up and kind of a 1 minute and 2 minute version. So the short version will be 1 minute and the long version will be 2 minutes. And they build off of the menu music so that you kind of have this consistency. If you want to use this while you're prototyping a game, you'll be able to have some consistency between your trailers, your menu music, and your in-game music. They'll all fit along the same theme. And at least these 3 main tracks, they use the same set of sounds and instruments, so you can freely switch between them, and it still sounds really consistent. It still sounds like they would fit in the same game. So it gives you 3 different options. So that's what's in the pack. Now let's see about actually implementing this in the level itself. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, go into this pack. We'll go into the blueprints and we'll take this adaptive action track class. We'll stick one of these out in the wild. All right, so when I pull this out, you'll see inside there's these definitions for low threat, high threat, battle overlay, melody 1 and melody 2. So I'll go into my adaptive loops go into the sound waves here, and I will match up. Let's go with unraveling the simulation, which is a little bit of the more kind of tense, slower tempo track that's included. And I'm going to start filling in the different levels. So low threat to low threat, high threat to high threat, and so on. All right, so that's all in. And then I am going to go to my player start. And I am going to add this adaptive action music to the player start. And I'm going to toggle the low threat on. All right, so the last thing we have to do is select the adaptive action track. So we'll just find it here, and at the bottom here you can see there's also an array. This is included so that if you have multiple tracks that you want to be switching between, you can stick them in this array, and then the blueprint includes a function that will handle the transitioning of a track either via an increment or a direct selection. In an upcoming update, I am going to basically automatically fill the array or add to the array with the selected adaptive action track in case you forget this. But in this version, we'll also have to stick it into the array. All right, so now that that's done, let's test this thing out. Okay. So now the level started with the low threat music, a nice ominous undertone. I've got my player character here. I have chosen Murdoch from the Paragon asset packs. So go Paragon. Now let's navigate to this adaptive action component and just toggle these things on and off directly from the details panel. Essentially, we'll be building triggers, events that will turn these things on and off dynamically in the game. But you can see the intended effect right from here. So first we'll just toggle the battle overlay on. Toggle that off. So you get the sense of how this is going to work. We'll put on, let's say, Melody 1. I've designed Melody 1 to go more with a low threat situation and Melody 2 to go more with a high threat situation. They'll still work depending on the mood you want to convey, but that's kind of my default. So let's hear Melody 2 over top here. So definitely works, but it's got a little bit of a contrast from the low ominous low threat to kind of a searing electric guitar. So it's up to you how you want to use this. Yeah. And then the volume and fade duration. So the volume will work well dynamically. So if, let's say I turn on the high threat, I turn the volume down to 33%, you can hear everything gets quieter. So this becomes a target volume for each component. And then the fade duration has given me issue while trying to adjust it dynamically, so I'm not going to touch it right now. But essentially, it'll just control how quickly the different components fade in and out. So actually what I might do is turn that off. So we've got total quiet, and yes, of course, you can turn the low threat off too. That doesn't have to be on all the time. Turning the high threat on by itself kind of has its own effect. So let's just see if I pull this down to, let's say, around half a second, turn the low threat back on, you can hear it ramps up much faster. And let's try and get the melody in. So that's a little overview of the functionality. The last thing we're going to do is just program in one dynamic music change so you can see how that workflow goes. So let's see, I'm going to move into this room. This is going to be, let's say, a high threat room. So I'm going to add, let's see, a trigger volume. So the goal here is basically I want this so when you walk out of the door, you'll hear the music change. Now, obviously, in a real level, you might want something a bit more complex than just this rectangle. You might want the event to be triggered not by a volume, but by some sort of event or some sort of state. Like if an enemy is aware of your presence, you might want to throw in the battle music, things like that. But this should give you the general workflow. So next we will open the level blueprint. And I'm going to add a reference to that trigger volume. Just go back and find my player again so that I can add a reference to the player. All right, so now what we're going to do off of the player, we're going to get component by class. We are going to find our adaptive action music. So this will now be selecting that adaptive action music class that is attached to the player start. And on the return value, now we can get and set the different pieces. So I will set the high threat on, and I think the way I will do it is we'll do a set high threat on, and we will just duplicate this because we will need an on and an off. I'm going to go back into the level. Let's find the trigger volume again. Okay. Go back in here, add event. For the trigger volume, add actor begin overlap and add on actor end overlap. So we'll just do it that way. And I will set when the overlap begins, the high threat turns on. And when the overlap ends, the high threat turns off. All right, and I may want to, if I were doing this for real, might want to throw in a check to make sure that the actor that's overlapping is in fact the player character. but for now, this should be okay. Now let's see if the composer successfully programmed a blueprint on a stream. This should be exciting. Right, so we've got low threat music playing. Let's walk into this area. Aha! And the high threat music has started playing. And if I walk out, the high threat music goes away. So it was a success. That's the basic tutorial of this adaptive sci-fi music, Retrofuturistic Dystopia. Yeah, let me know in the comments if this was helpful, if you have any suggestions, if you found any bugs, if you have any requests for future packs, if you have any requests for future functionality. I have got some fun ideas for like a semi-procedural type of music pack that I'm starting to work on, and I also have a full set of things planned for this adaptive sci-fi music series. It's going to range across a few different genres like space shooters or kind of more adventure focused things, more horror slanted things. And I think I'm going to try and have slightly different adaptive systems on each of these packs, so they're not all following the exact same template. It gives you a little bit more ideas, more creativity on how the music could change dynamically. And we'll see you all later.